Hello everyone, and a special what's up to all you doctors out there. Welcome back to the show that today will become a full-on hybrid hair hootenanny. I'm your human host, Mark Ellis, and it's my job to escort you through the loony hijinks of Toontown and the rest of planet Earth, whose very fate might be at stake in this cartoon crossover cavalcade. Space Jam versus Who Framed Roger Rabbit. In one corner, we have the revolutionary big screen rabbit known as Roger to his pals and Raja to Bob Hoskins. In the other, it's the bunny who started it all, alongside another mythological figure who's usually posing with an orange prop, Michael Jordan. Air Jordan, Hair Jordan, and the rest of the Looney Tunes are taking on Roger, Jessica, and all the cigar-chomping babies you can ask for. Here's how we'll determine a winner. Round 1, box office. Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. Round 3, characters. Round 4, cultural impact. And then we'll do a wild card round that could just be Roadrunner battling the coyotes from Who Framed Roger with their hyenas. Okay, well, Roadrunner's gonna battle some hyenas. The winner of today's match might get a shout out somewhere in the next 10 episodes of The Last Dance. The loser? Not dip. It's okay, I talked to the judge and he agreed to drop the sentencing down to a drop piano on the head. Apologies to anyone in the Valiant family watching today. For everyone else, it's time for the opening tip.
Dun, 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 dun.
Now Roger is his name. Laughter is his game. Come on, you dope, untie his rope and watch him go insane.
Round 1, box office. Since motion pictures became less time-consuming than learning how to read, talkies starring human beings tend to do well at the Cineplex. Movies featuring animated characters are even more of a buck churner, and when you put live action and animation together, you get boffo box office. Sorry, not you, Cool World, but most other people. When Who Framed Roger Rabbit was released in theaters in the summer of 1988, it became the must-see phenomenon of the year. So much so that it ended up grossing $154 million in domestic receipts, which equals $344 million in today money. That's got to be the highest grossing film that year, right? Uh-oh, time for Wapner. Rain Man, the film that sunk Kmart stock and won Best Picture, was the only flick to Best Roger at the cinemas. Mr. Rabbit and his lovely wife ushered in a fresh new perspective on animation, and the revolutionary technology that married human actors with their toon counterparts inspired a new wave of affection for hand-drawn characters, including some of Roger's predecessors, like a duck, a mouse, a Martian, and yes, a bunny. Space Jam took flight 8 years later in the fall of 1996, which was conveniently just after Michael Jordan led the Chicago Bulls to their 4th NBA title in 6 years and their first since he returned from the baseball diamond.
Yeah, but I'm a baseball player now.
Right. And I'm a Shakespearean actor.
Ugh, another long-winded sports reference from Mark. Is that what you said? Well, yes, but that's also relevant because that's basically the plot of Space Jam. Just replace Mike's human teammates with classic Looney Tunes characters, swap out the Eastern Conference for the otherworldly villains known as the Monstars, add a dash of Bill Murray, and presto, Space Jam. The Thanksgiving hit would do $90 million in domestic business, which nets out to $187 million when we adjust for inflation. Both films were also worldwide box office success stories, as R.K. Maroon's Rabbit bested the Warner Brothers Bunny with an earthly total of $354 million to $250 million. Who Framed Roger Rabbit was the bigger hit, but it was also the most expensive film ever made up to that point, utilizing every penny of its $70 million allowance. Meanwhile, if you caught The Last Dance, you saw footage of the basketball court / workout complex that Warner's built for his Ernest to train during Space Jam. I just hope that didn't cost $70 million because I would really like to add one of them onto my studio apartment. I know. The real question everyone has is, hey Mark, what movie was the all-time highest budget before Roger came along? The answer? You guessed it. Rambo 3. Roger would eventually see his record fall to another muscly action hero, some guy from the future who came back in time to buy sunglasses and learn a tiny bit of Spanish. It's hasta la vista for Space Jam in this round, as unfortunately, I'm not allowed to factor in the Jordan brand's net worth. Well, not in this round, anyway. Roger Rabbit gets the win and is on the board first, 1-0.
But I still got it, Eddie. Boop, boop, be-doo, boop.
Yeah, you still got it.
Round 2, Tomatometer / audience score. Okay, so the Toon Squad is down a free throw early in the game, but now they have a chance to catch up because surely the Tomatometer will honor the legacy of the greatest player to, no? No. Being told not. Critics didn't necessarily fall in love with the jam as it sits rotten on the Tomatometer at a mere 43%. Hey, someone should do a podcast about this tragedy. Maybe you call it Rotten Tomatoes is wrong.
Nope.
So if the world's most famous baller and Earth's favorite carrot enthusiast can't get the critics on their team, what chance do any other tunes have? Well, if you're a revolutionary like Roger Rabbit, the odds are ever in your favor. Who Framed That Guy is a certified fresh, prepare yourself, 97% on the Tomatometer. It's nice to have the signature style of Richard Williams' creations on your side. It's even better when they meet up with filmmaking geniuses like Steven Spielberg and director Robert Zemeckis. Of course, Roger also had a leg, or a paw, I don't know what you call bunny appendages. He had a thing up on the competition simply because he arrived on this technological Plymouth Rock first. If it makes Space Jam feel any better, Cool World also had to follow in the more immediate aftermath of Jessica and her hubby, and it's just 4% on the Tomatometer. Yeesh. Roger Rabbit also has an impressive audience score, landing again at fresh with 84%. Meanwhile, Space Jam's audience score does give it its first taste of fresh, as it does just stretch it out to 63%. So here's the bad news for Space Jam fans. Your movie's not going to win this round either, and it's down 2-0. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is going to take round number 2, but not before I give some verbal Gatorade to Michael Jordan. The documentary The Last Dance is tied with Roger Rabbit on the Tomatometer at 97% and has an audience score of 95%. If you watch that documentary, you know being up 2-0 is a really good place to be. Unless there's a certain guy named Mike on the other team.
I know it down.
Oh yeah, let's hear the story.
But I've been in this situation many times before.
Oh, this is a
We can still win this thing.
Round 3, character. Yeah, that Mike fella also goes by Michael Jeffrey Jordan, aka the greatest athlete to ever walk the face of the earth. Sorry, Bo Jackson, it's true, which makes him somewhat of a compelling character, you might say. But in order to win a round based on characters, it's not going to be an individual effort. It should be a team victory. Luckily, that's the entire premise of Space Jam. A squad of famous cartoon characters must defeat an otherworldly team so villainous they call themselves the Monstars, and they even had the audacity to steal the basketball talents of Sean Bradley, Patrick Ewing, Grandmama Larry Johnson, and Charles Barkley. You see, kids, before he was a fun TV analyst, he actually played a sport called basketball. Really, really well. So much so, he even dunked on Godzilla once. It's true. It's what YouTube's for.
The Lakers are looking for a big man.
Oh, and we couldn't forget diminutive Wake Forest legend Muggsy Bogues. That's not only a who's who of great ballers, it's also a cast of memorable characters that could rival most film franchises.
Don't lose that confidence.
But Space Jam was just getting started. Whereas Who Framed Roger Rabbit had to largely create new characters for the film, the Toon Squad had the luxury of placing the most famous animated talking animals ever into a basketball movie. No offense, Mickey, Bugs Bunny, Daffy Duck, Yosemite Sam, Sylvester the Cat, Pepe Le Pew, and I'm told he's canceled, Foghorn the Leghorn, Tweety Bird, Marvin the Martian, so many more, and we got Lola Bunny. Yep, we got a new Looney Tune lady just for the movie, which sort of makes Space Jam a precursor to Love and Basketball.
Don't ever call me doll.
But if it's on-screen sparks you want, the rabbits to hit up would be Roger and Jessica.
You were magnificent.
Was I really?
Better than Goofy.
She's a sultry nightclub vixen, and he, a world-famous plate smasher. Their romance had more ups and downs than, well, an NBA playoff series. This round is going to still be a challenge for Who Framed Roger Rabbit because we had only just met most of these characters on the movie poster as we strolled into the theater. But once we got there, we felt like we'd known them our whole lives. In part because every circle of friends has that mismatched pair that argue, like Roger and Jessica. We've all sat next to them at a dinner party. Speaking of mismatches, imagine being handcuffed to a cartoon as wild and as frenzied as Roger. Or better yet, put yourself in the rabbit's comically oversized shoes. You're handcuffed to a gruff, down-on-his-luck gumshoe named Eddie Valiant. Oh, and his brother was killed when a tune dropped the piano on his head.
A tune? No.
Who Framed Roger Rabbit makes a run in this round because of that human component. Bob Hoskins is playing it straight, and he becomes the perfect foil for Roger's antics, and Joanna Cassidy's Dolores seasons the proceedings with just the right amount of spice to inspire Eddie.
He always is funny, or only on days when he's wanted for murder?
Unlike the movies, here villains can team up with their heroic counterparts in hopes to score a point, and Judge Doom presents a strong case for best villain of the 1980s. I said it, and I don't consider it a hot take. Christopher Lloyd was the exact right choice to play an authoritarian figure that hates cartoons so much he invented his own sick formula to rid the world of them. Dip! And now, it's fun sidebar time. Did you know that in the film, dip is described as a combination of elements, which is actually the same cocktail used to erase used animation cells and make them fit to be a fresh canvas again? So in reality, that stuff does actually kill toons.
Well, Doom found the way. Turpentine, acetone, benzene. He calls it the dip.
The Monstars are a fun group of evil aliens to root against, and Danny DeVito was the best possible iteration of Swackhammer one could hope for. And although the humans in Who Framed Roger Rabbit blended together much more believably than in Space Jam, that wasn't necessarily the goal of the 1996 beloved classic. Michael Jordan will never be confused with Bob Hoskins as far as acting chops or height goes.
Obviously.
But the mere fact that MJ, the GOAT of roundball, starred in a major motion picture as he was returning to his apex in the NBA goes beyond, hey, are you trained in Stanislavski's method? And if it is humanity you crave, don't worry. Bill Murray, Wayne Knight, and Larry Bird don't just round out golf's most unique foursome. Particularly Murray provides a steady diet of laughs to get all the folks who aren't there for loony basketball time through with a smile on their face.
What kind of camera is that?
Would you not point that at me, please, and close the lens cap?
Who Framed Roger Rabbit deserves a ton of credit for creating a whole new world of remarkably lovable animated friends and foes. Charles Fleischer, the voice of Roger, and Benny the Cab, and Greasy, and Psycho, deserves the lion's share of credit for making Roger's hyper-manic energy endearing, as does animation legend Richard Williams. But Space Jam has Michael Jordan, and the Looney Tunes, and Bill Murray. Toontown put up a good fight, but it's the Toon Squad that takes this round, and they're on the board. It's Roger 2, MJ 1.
What can you do? Well, you know, I may not be very tall, but I'm slow.
Round 4, Cultural Influence. When we think about the most influential art ever made, one could be forgiven if Roger Rabbit or Bugs Bunny don't immediately come to mind, and sure, no one's going to confuse these two movies with heralded game changers like Citizen Kane, Star Wars, or Rocky IV. What? It ended the Cold War. I'm not making this up. Watch the documentary. We're not indestructible. But you'd be hard-pressed to find two movies that created a more seismic shift in filmmaking techniques and an influence on younger generations than Who Framed Roger Rabbit and Space Jam. In 1988, when we met Roger and saw him interact with Eddie Valiant for the first time, it wasn't the first small step into live-action animated crossovers. After all, Dick Van Dyke had danced with penguins in that Babysitter with Questionable Tactics movie some 20 years earlier. But it was a giant leap in terms of technological achievement, making it look like Roger and Eddie were actually playing along with one another. Look no further than when they got handcuffed together. And if it's influence on films that scores points in this round, how about the resurgence in animated flicks that arose in no small part thanks to the success of Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Disney's classic animated films had hit somewhat of a dry spell by the 1980s, but the improved techniques and kinetic energy, not to mention box office, of Roger Rabbit helped pave the way for those early 90s classics like Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, and The Lion King. The arcade Maroon Tunes influence would even impact non-Disney content such as Space Jam. Space Jam owes much of its very existence to Who Framed Roger Rabbit, as well as the re-emergence of the Looney Tunes characters into the public consciousness in the early 1990s. But once Space Jam finally hit theaters after a mad dash to get it completed on time, which, get this, included 18 different studio houses all collaborating on the film, it spawned a legacy that could even rival that of its protagonist, Michael Jordan. You could not have found a better star athlete or more perfect timing to have this movie come out. Jordan had re-cemented his place on top of basketball Olympus, and now kids who may not have stayed up to watch his NBA heroics could get an up-close look at Mike interacting with their favorite cartoons.
His Royal Airness, Michael Jordan!
Space Jam ushered in a new era of athletes crossing over from the gridiron, court, or diamond to the world of entertainment. Once again, Michael Jordan paving the way and setting a standard for all players to try to live up to. LeBron James, Kevin Durant, Jimmy Butler, and more have all found success in front of the camera on the big screen in addition to their on-court prowess. And all of them have credited Space Jam with having a huge influence on their careers. And even for stars who'd rather stick to round ball, virtually every modern NBA player first got to see MJ, not in a game or even a Gatorade ad, but when he saved the world from the Monstars in Space Jam. The Jordan brand has become one of the most profitable and identifiable corporate entities in the world. So much so that critics might point to Space Jam as nothing more than a 90-minute Nike commercial.
Cool shoes.
In fact, director Joe Pytka actually did direct 2 Air Jordan ads in the early 90s, as well as the Nothing But Net ads, where Magic and Larry are having a shooting contest for Big Macs. Now, why 2 multimillionaires can't just buy their own $2 sandwich beats me, but that's the beauty of competition.
Listen, it's a man's game. And you can't play.
If Space Jam was just an ad for Mike and the Looney Tunes, it did the trick. To date, Space Jam has racked up an astonishing $1.2 billion in merchandising sales, and at last count featured 78 product tie-ins, 70 of which are owned by yours truly. Economists now gauge the total financial impact of that movie to be, okay, I need you to sit down again, between $4 to $6 billion bucks. The movie did well at theaters, but that's some Dr. Evil cheddar right there. Also of note is the Space Jam soundtrack, which featured a combo of jock jams and R&B tunes. No, not that kind of tune. The music version of tune that had become synonymous with Bugs, Mike, Daffy, and the gang winning the most important sporting event in the history of recorded time. From a cinematic standpoint, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is by far the more influential motion picture. Its countless innovations and advancements reinvigorated the stale state of animation, and it gave another feather in the cap of Back to the Future director Robert Zemeckis, who would go on to add films like Forrest Gump, What Lies Beneath, and Flight to his resume. But since its release in 1996, Space Jam has become a cultural touchstone in the world of sports, music, and animation. In terms of Michael Jordan's career, Who Framed Roger Rabbit might be when Jordan established himself as the best basketball player on Earth, but Space Jam is when the rest of the planets aligned to start winning championships. Space Jam wins the round, and all of a sudden, we're tied at 2 apiece.
Special deliveries!
And now it's time for the wild card round, rewatchability. You just gotta wonder if Who Framed Roger Rabbit is feeling a bit like the Utah Jazz right now. You had Jordan on the edge of elimination, but now he's tied the game and the ball is in his hands. And upon rewatching Space Jam, it still holds up in terms of comedy, thank you Bill Murray,
Perhaps I could be of some assistance.
and seeing our favorite animated characters in their prime, thank you Looney Tunes.
Well, that's how it goes.
It's also just plain fun to see MJ, have a good time. For years, the bulk of our Michael Jordan experience was seeing his laser-like intensity and near psychopathic competitive drive on the court. For every fun Hanes underwear ad, there were full playoff series that saw him endure double and even triple teams, not to mention the Jordan rules. And in context of where he was in his career, the MJ in Space Jam was truly at a crossroads, coming back from baseball after being humbled by a younger, friskier Orlando Magic team featuring fellow movie star Shaq in the previous year's playoffs. Just think about the confidence MJ must have had in order to agree to do a movie where he returns from baseball to play basketball and win it all before he was able to do that same feat in real life. That's the Michael we get to witness in Space Jam, and for what it's worth, he's pretty damn charismatic in his first starring role. The scene that still gets me is when he's golfing with his buddies. We get a look into Jordan in his other natural element, having fun and talking trash with Bill Murray, Wayne Knight, and Larry Legend. It's a fun conduit into the Looney Tunes universe, and from there, it's really on our animated pals to drive the movie home. Who Framed Roger Rabbit may not have any human stars that will command a 10-part documentary series, but that was never the point. This wasn't a movie looking to prop up a superstar or sell a ton of fast food product tie-ins. It was a true marriage of live action and animation inside a film noir detective shell that just happened to appeal to everyone. And I'm happy to report it still holds up as just that great. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is legendary. The mood feels like old-timey Hollywood through a funhouse mirror, and luckily the movie doesn't need to slow to a crawl to explain that this is an alternate universe where toons exist as real characters. Humans don't necessarily get along with them all that well, but that becomes the charm of the film itself. Eddie and Roger forced to work together against a villainous presence that isn't all he appears to be.
Holy smoke, he's a toon! Surprise!
Whatever the artistic goal of Space Jam might have been, its crowning achievement will always be its nostalgia quality. And when memories of a simpler time are on demand like that, it warrants not only love and respect, but a sequel! Here's a fun prop bet. Will Michael Jordan show up for a cameo in Space Jam 2 starring LeBron James? A few years ago, I would have said no, not in 100 million years, no matter how cold it gets in Satan's foyer. But now, I'm thinking there's a shot. I am looking forward to Space Jam 2. There's more stories we can tell with a new generation of great athletes and our favorite characters on the big screen. But if it comes down to only revisiting either Space Jam or Who Framed Roger Rabbit on my TV, it's the story, acting, and sheer comic energy of Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I'll flip to Space Jam during commercials, and yes, I'll probably be lounging in my Toon Squad jersey and my Jordans that day. Space Jam is a fun stroll down memory lane. Who Framed Roger Rabbit is a true cinematic landmark that utilizes its new technology not to show it off, but as inventive means with which we can tell a story that can be enjoyed by the entire family. It's a close contest here, but Michael Jordan finally takes a loss. No one tell him that. Please, please. I don't want to meet him and then it's awkward one day. Who Framed Roger Rabbit wins the round, and thus the match 3-2.
My buddy Betty B, a sour put you'll see. But when I'm done, he'll leave no gun to the joker, he will be.
In this episode, I'm what you might call a tweener. I was a little too young to fully appreciate Roger Rabbit, though I did love his plate-smashing antics. And I could have been a smidgen too old to be deeply influenced by Space Jam, although at the time Looney Tunes did represent about 70% of my wardrobe. It has been a treat to celebrate both milestones in any youngster's life here today, and now, I ask you, which movie had the greater impact on your life? Hit me up online at Mark Ellis Live or at any of Rotten Tomatoes' social media channels. Until next time, I am Mark Ellis, reminding each and everyone out there, you're the duck.